15-year-old Paula Cooper was born in Chicago to Herman and Gloria Cooper on August 25, 1969. Her sister and only other sibling, Rhonda, was 3 years older. Early on in their life, the family lived in Michigan City, but by the time Paula was old enough for school, they had moved to Gary, Indiana. The girls attended Bethune Grade School, which was extremely close to the home and next to their church, where Paula sang in the choir and helped with the little children's Bible classes. But her childhood was not all dandy. Their father, Herman, would disappear for weeks at a time and come back when he felt like it. When he was home, he repeatedly beat on the girls with an object or his own fists. He was also extremely physically abusive towards their mother, Gloria. In one instance in 1979, Herman returned home and found himself locked out. After forcing his way back in, he raped Gloria in front of the children. Afterwards, Gloria took a handful of medications with alcohol and ushered 9-year-old Paula and her 12-year-old sister Rhonda into the garage, telling them that they were going to see Jesus. She then turned on the car in the garage until they passed out from carbon monoxide. Suddenly, Gloria had a change of heart and pulled her 2 unconscious daughters out of the garage and got back in by herself. Once Rhonda woke up, she alerted a neighbor and an ambulance arrived to save their mother's life. Not one personnel checked on the girls that day. Months after the car incident, Rhonda found out that their father, Herman, was not her biological father. Paula and Rhonda attempted to run away from home multiple times, only to be returned home by the police. Rhonda eventually left the house for good to live with her biological father, while Paula began skipping classes and fighting girls at school and transferring 2 to 3 times a year. By the age of 14, she was drinking, smoking, taking drugs, and skipping school. She escaped home again and again and was placed in multiple foster homes, shelters, juvenile detentions, and eventually a mental health center. Each time she would return home, she was met with more violence. On one occasion, Herman drove her to the woods and beat her for 30 minutes, almost killing her. She was trapped in an endless cycle of violence at home, which translated to her life on the outside. On this day, Paula skipped school with 3 of her friends, 13-year-old Denise Thomas, 16-year-old Karen Corder, and 15-year-old April Beverly. They were conversing while drinking alcohol and smoking marijuana when the conversation shifted to devising a plan to get money. Eventually, they agreed on convincing a woman in the neighborhood to give them money. April knew of one neighbor, 78-year-old Ruth Pelky, and suggested to the group that they could get into her house to get money and jewelry and different things by asking her when she held Bible classes. The group agreed to this plan, so they walked up to Mrs. Pelky's house and rang her door. She answered and the girls spoke to her, but were not able to convince her to let them inside, so they walked off. However, the girls were persistent and wanted to try her door again. But this time, they carried a knife. April handed over the knife to Paula to use to scare the old lady with, and they tried again. This time around, the girls were successful getting inside once they asked Mrs. Pelky to write down the information about her Bible classes. However, she was not aware of their plans, nor aware that they possessed a weapon. While Mrs. Pelky wrote down the information, Paula grabbed her from behind and pushed her to the floor. Once she was down, Paula proceeded to hit her on the head with the vase. She then pulled out the knife, cut Mrs. Pelky's arms and legs, and stabbed her in the stomach and in the chest. The autopsy later revealed that she was stabbed 33 times. Amidst the stabbings, Mrs. Pelky uttered to Paula, "If you do this, you'll be sorry." Paula asked one of the girls to hold the knife while she searched the house, but the girls were hesitant and horrified at what they witnessed. All they could gather was the keys to Mrs. Pelky's 1976 Plymouth car, which they eventually used to get away, and $10. The next morning, her son Robert Pelky phoned Ruth to check up on her, but she did not pick up the phone. Concerned, he decided to check the house in person. Just 3 days prior, Ruth's family had taken her out for a Mother's Day dinner, but when he showed up, there was no answer. He opened the mail slot on the door to shout for her and only heard silence. But what he did notice was something strange. Her dining room was torn apart. He started to look around the house for the spare key Ruth kept around, and in the midst of doing so, noticed her car was gone and thought, perhaps she left. However, once he found the key and stepped into the house, he noticed the place appeared to be ransacked. Cushions were all over the place, pictures were torn off the walls, and right on the dining room floor was Ruth's motionless body. His mother had been murdered for a full day. He phoned the police, and an investigation ensued. Within 2 days, all 4 of the girls were arrested for the crimes and pleaded guilty to the charges of Ruth Pelky's murder and robbery. April Beverly was sentenced to 25 years, Denise Thomas sentenced to 35, and Karen Corder to 60 years for their involvement. However, Paula faced the death penalty as she was considered to be the ringleader of the group of girls. The prosecutor in the case portrayed Paula Cooper as a social misfit with no hopes of rehabilitation and asked for the death penalty. However, Paula's lawyers described her as a victim of physical abuse who was forced to witness countless violent physical and sexual assaults from her father to her mother. They went into detail of her harrowing childhood in hopes of the court understanding that Paula did not have a fair chance. However, there was little question of her guilt in the case as she admitted to the facts. According to authorities, Paula attacked guards in the juvenile center after her arrest and had to be moved to the county jail. There, it was reported that she bragged about her crime and had said she would do it again. Paula was found guilty, and the judge in the case imposed the death penalty by the electric chair. She would be the youngest person on death row at 16 years old. After sentencing, Paula was sent to death row at Indiana Women's Prison in Indianapolis. Her case was then taken up by an attorney named Monica Foster, who, angered by the verdict in the case, organized a campaign which presented an appeal signed by 2 million people to the state Supreme Court. Pope John Paul II made a personal appeal to Indiana's Governor Robert Orr in September 1987 as well. There was another appeal to the United Nations that received 1 million signatures on behalf of Paula's case. Her case was then broadcasted on an episode of 60 Minutes and other European television programs. She became front-page news in her hometown of Gary, including numerous other scandals alleging hookups with guards while in prison. The judge in her case died, and so the appeals process was slowed as they were choosing a replacement. Shockingly, the state of Indiana passed a bill in 1987 that raised the minimum age for the death penalty from 10 years old to 16. Although the change was a reaction to Paula's case, it also made it clear that it did not affect her sentence, but rather justified it. However, this would change in 1988 when a Supreme Court decision, Thompson v. Oklahoma, barred the death penalty for defendants under the age of 16 at the time of their crime. With this decision, Indiana courts reduced 19-year-old Paula's sentence from the death penalty to life imprisonment of 60 years on July 3, 1989. A New York Times editorial that month called the court's decision brave and said the law in which her death sentence was based on was medieval, as it allowed the execution of children as young as 10 in the first place. While in prison, Paula earned a GED and took college correspondence courses. Over time, she garnered a positive reputation for her kindness, putting together small packs of noodles and other items for women who did not have any money to spend at the commissary. She made countless friends and was known to be the kind of woman who would support and befriend other women ostracized in prison. Although she was sentenced to 60 years, Indiana law states that offenders earn 1 day off from their sentence for each day served with good behavior. After 27 years, 43-year-old Paula was released from prison on June 17, 2013. Prior to her release, Paula had high hopes of her life on the outside.
Well, when I get out, I don't care if I have to sweep floors, wash dishes, or flip hamburgers. I'm going to take whatever I can get, just to get on my feet and show people that I deserve a chance.
Monica Foster, who helped save her life through the petitions, hired her as her legal assistant. She also met her soon-to-be fiancé, LaShawn Davidson. Though she still received backlash for her crimes, she also received plenty of support and a second chance now as an adult. However, she struggled with assimilating and enjoying her newfound freedom and still feeling held back by her past. One day, Ornisha, a friend from prison who was released as well, received a phone call from Paula and invited her to come by during her lunch break at work, sensing something was up with her. Once Paula arrived and they sat down at a table, she began to sob uncontrollably, telling her, "Friend, I can't do it no more," while touching her hand to her chest, saying, "It's on the inside." Ornisha didn't want to pry as to what was happening since Paula was a private person, but figured maybe it was issues she was having with her fiancé. Nonetheless, she invited her to stay over at her place for a few days. Together they shopped, and Paula asked for some paper and envelopes before they spent time out on the patio smoking and writing. On the early morning of May 26, 2015, Ornisha awoke to find Paula gone, but heard the screams of her husband calling for her downstairs. Once she rushed downstairs, he handed her 3 envelopes and a letter for Ornisha. She read the first sentence of the letter that wrote something along the lines of Paula wanting to go where no eyes could see her and hear the birds chirp for one last time and see the sun come up. Upon reading the first line, she dropped the letter and she and her husband went to look for her. After an unsuccessful search, they spoke to police officers over the phone, and that was when they learned that Paula was found under a tree on the north side of the city, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to her head. Despite her release in 2013 being a big event in the city, the news of her death spread even quicker. In her Toyota Corolla at the scene, they found a tape recording left on her front seat where she spoke to those she loved to say her goodbyes and left funeral instructions. She asked to be cremated, but her mother chose to bury her instead. All her loved ones held a memorial service following her music and food requests on her behalf, including Ruth's grandson, Bill Pelky. Bill Pelky initially favored the death penalty, but soon joined the movement of opposing it in 1987, 2 years after his grandmother's murder. As a young devout Christian and veteran, he had witnessed his father scrubbing the blood from the walls and carpet in his grandmother's house. But then he soon came to believe that his grandmother would not have wanted to see this young girl executed. He later stated he was actually haunted by the memory of Paula's grandfather on the day she was sentenced to death. In his 2003 memoir, Journey of Hope, neither of Paula's parents attended her hearing, but her grandfather was escorted out of the courtroom screaming, "They are going to kill my baby." Bill later visited her grandfather, and together they looked at pictures of Paula and Rhonda. The more he learned about Paula's upbringing, the more certain he became that his grandmother would have forgiven her. He even tried to visit her in prison but was denied permission, so he and Paula exchanged letters for years. Eventually, he gained permission and visited her 14 times. When her death sentence was commuted to life in prison in 1989, Bill's first words were "Praise the Lord," and by the time she was released in 2013, neither of them were the same person they had been in 1985. Bill had founded Journey of Hope from Violence to Healing, which is known as one of the most influential anti-death penalty groups in the country, all led by victims of crime. Bill said there would be no Journey of Hope without Paula Cooper. Unfortunately, Bill never had the opportunity to meet Paula after her release, as the system made sure that she would not have contact with the victim's family. Though Bill had already forgiven Paula for what happened to his grandmother, her friends say Paula did not feel worthy of forgiveness. She wrote in a letter to her fiancé before her death, "I have taken a life and never felt worthy." Paula had never escaped her past, and it ultimately led to her demise. This is the tragic story of the life and death of Paula Cooper. May Ruth and Paula rest in paradise, and ease and healing be brought forth to their loved ones. Let us know your thoughts on this case in the comments, and thank you all for watching.